Good morning. If we could come to order, please. All right. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, that's better. All right. Let me call to order the Appropriations Subcommittee for the Judicial Branch and ask Senator Albers, would you open us up in a morning prayer, please?
It'd be my pleasure. Please bow your heads. Lord God, please just to give us your abundant blessing and your wisdom during this meeting today. And while we are deliberating and doing the people's work, I'm going to ask that you put a hedge of protection around all those in Ukraine right now, that you give them your comfort, your grace, and that freedom and liberty may be the answer of the day. In the Lord's most holy name we make our prayers. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Senator Albers. I appreciate that. Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate everyone's attendance to give us an opportunity to receive information from various groups about our FY 2023 budgets. And so with that, I'm sorry we're a few minutes late, but we're going to roll right into it. And let me ask for the Court of Appeals, please. Morning, Judge.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Your mic is on, and thank you for being with us. Actually, I'll turn both mics on. And Judge, the floor is yours.
As I told the House, one of the healthiest things in the system is when judges have to sit and answer questions from other people because it keeps us humble. I will quickly do a few things, give you some general information tailored to the areas that I think this subcommittee has been interested in, and as mentioned by Chairman Tillery previously, and go straight into our specific requests. It goes without saying, do not hesitate to interrupt me and tell me what you would like to hear, because we're here to provide you information, not to tell you what we think you want us to tell you. As for case statistics, it was specifically mentioned by Chairman Tillery in the full appropriations that courts need to be prepared to talk about how the pandemic's affecting them. You will see they are submitted by fiscal year in our budget. It's very predictable. Up through 2019, the numbers were going up, just as all of you would expect, and most of our Georgia courts tend to trend up. 2020 and 2021 is where you start to see the trend downward. As you would expect, there's a lag time between when cases will be ramping up in our trial courts and when we can expect to be hit with those cases moving forward. And as you all know, right now the trial courts are ground zero for that. Why is that important to even bring up? We will certainly have not sought any additional funding either from the American Rescue Act or in a form of appropriation right now that's tied to cases, because our trial courts need that money more than we do, and I just want you to know that. I also want you to know on that end that when we come before you, this is my second time before you just on the amended budget, but out of this pandemic, we will never seek to grow our court simply for the sake of growing it. We'll use numbers, data, and objective criteria to come before you and say, this is what the numbers show and this is what we need. Next, a few brief items that I'd like for you to know. What are we doing to be reflective about the pandemic? And what are we doing to be reflective as a court, as stewards of the money that you give to us? First, I want you to know we have a committee that is working dedicated to reviewing all the fees we charge, how they compare to other courts, how they compare to our colleagues on the Supreme Court, not just Georgia but nationwide, what is necessary and what is unnecessary. That's chaired by Judge Sarah Dole if you have any input or questions, and to make sure that everything we charge is objectively and reasonably necessary, taking into account the digital environment. We have rather than the old tradition of just so much per page, we have pricing guidelines that take into account access to volumes of the digital record. We are part of multiple joint efforts. I want to commend our colleagues on the Supreme Court that are examining little things like style, citation formats, also rules, so that we work together to find every way we can to harmonize so that for practitioners that is simpler, easier, and more user-friendly. Clearly we have different jurisdiction, different judges, different courts, but for those ways that we can work together, we are doing that. Judge Dillard, is on that style committee. Working from home for our staff has gone very well in the pandemic. Each judge sets his or her own parameters, but overall it has worked well. I will tell you that one side benefit that I see is I think each judge gets to decide how much, but most of our judges are so comfortable with work from home. We may in the future for positions at our court, including staff attorneys, be able to attract Georgians from a broader area. We've been a metro-heavy court for years, but with work from home, the prospect of driving in once or twice a week is much different than every day or 3 or 4 days a week. So that's one side benefit. Maybe we can get some perspectives that are broader from other parts of Georgia. We continue to have the Zoom option for oral argument. As we stand today, that is an option that a lawyer can simply select because of the pandemic. I am comfortable in telling you that our plan as of now, it has not been formalized, is that there will likely be a Zoom option at the Georgia Court of Appeals going forward permanently. What we will be doing is rewriting our rules and formalizing them so that instead of just selecting, a lawyer can file a motion to request to appear by Zoom. Some of those reasons, for example, let's say you have an assistant public defender and assistant DA in Waycross, Georgia. They both would like to appear by Zoom. The budget hit to them to drive and stay in a hotel from Waycross doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. That could be as much as $1,000 for hotel rooms and mileage. That would be a legitimate reason to us that our judges are going to consider. Another example, you might have an attorney from Savannah, Georgia who says, if I can appear by Zoom, I can make it to Judge so-and-so's courtroom at 1, or quite frankly, I can make it to my parents' medical appointment. And we're looking at all of that right now. And we have a hybrid option where the other side can still choose to appear in person. So to Chief Justice Namias's State of the Judiciary address, when he said, what are we learning that we can keep as a result of the pandemic to make the system better, that's where we're at. We think that's going to be an option. Our website, our network, we have learned are everything. That's how folks interact with us for the most part. We are updating and redesigning our website as we speak. We are examining everything about IT that we do, from the programs we use, the way we use them, what does the future look like 5 or 10 years down the road. Our IT committee is very active, and I give you my word that we are examining all of that. As you will see in our specific requests, they are largely IT related. Going down the list, I'll answer any specific questions, but you'll see there's a general theme: cybersecurity, an evaluation of our cyber security and our software. A couple of quick points to note on these requests. Number one, we believe they save us people. We are using products that can do some of these functions without using more people. And number two, they are all tied into our cybersecurity insurance, things we have to do to get cybersecurity insurance. One last thing I will mention is there is a joint cyber insurance committee chaired by Justice Charlie Bethel. I think I saw him here. And what I wanted to note to you is we are all in the process of working together to see if we can get cybersecurity insurance for a broader class of courts that saves money. As you might imagine, that is very involved. That is a huge committee that Justice Bethel has taken on, and it involves multiple networks, multiple classes of courts, so it's going to take time. But I did want you to know that we are all looking at ways to perhaps save money, get one global policy, and reduce that appropriation. That is all the specifics. I wanted to be quick, but also wanted to make sure I did a good job in giving you guys information about our court. We are thankful for what you have done for us. There was a time during the pandemic when we were petrified, as I know all other agencies were, about what we were going to be able to do. It didn't turn out that way because of the relationships over here, and we are grateful, and we do not take that for granted, and we thank you, and I'm here to answer your questions.
All right. Thank you, Judge, for that presentation. Questions from the committee? I don't see any questions. Judge, thank you for the presentation. Have a good morning. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll have Georgia's statewide business court. Morning, Judge.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Just a few items to note. As you know, we opened a little over 2.5 years ago. We are currently sitting at roughly 66 cases during that period of time. We remain the only court in Georgia and one of very few in the country that requires all parties to agree to appear in the court. And so that provision has reduced our caseload by about 35 to 40%. The average time for disposition from the time, and we're hearing a lot of what we hear on the papers. We're seeing a lot of dispositive motions on our commercial cases. We adopted a rule that Delaware has, which was that you'll have a written order that would be substantive in nature within 90 days. So we're somewhere between 75 and 80 days on the cases that we're hearing. So we're moving them very quickly. Happy to report that we also have our first jury trial coming up next month. With the cooperation and approval of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals in our building, we are actually going to have the jury trial in the Nathan Deal Judicial Center in the conference room. The voir dire will occur in the Fulton County Superior Court via the virtual method that Judge Taylor set up and facilitated during COVID so effectively. We are trying to be one of the more hands-on courts. We have status conferences in every case once a month. We have a mandatory case management conference to make sure we come out of the gate effectively. The parties can opt out of that if they can agree on it. But what we're trying to do is move cases quickly, trying to move them efficiently, and kind of meet the mandate that you all set up when you created the business court. I'll certainly answer any questions that you all have on any of that. On our budget, this is identical to the budget that received favorable approval from this committee during the supplemental process. The one thing I will note is on 13.1, it references the annual leave payouts for our term clerks. As you may recall, we have a staff attorney and two one-year term clerks that staff my part of the court, and then I have our clerk of court, Ms. Davis, here, and she's got her team as well. We received a payout during supplemental for the annual leave for those term clerks and tried to estimate what we would incur going forward. That was zeroed out by the House. I think the rationale was that as we incur it, we can come back and ask for it. So it's really just do we get it on the front end or do we ask for it on the back end? But we expect that will be an annual request that we will have to come back and ask for as that number is calculated upon their departure every year. Did I get that generally right? And with that, I will answer any questions you all have.
All right. Any questions from the committee? All right.
Sure.
Judge Davis, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right. Next, the Judicial Council. I'm going in the order of the way it's in the our budget materials. Morning, Justice Bethel.
Good morning, Chairman.
Good to see you.
Wonderful to see you and be here. And I appreciate the opportunity to present the budget of the Judicial Council Administrative Office of the Courts to you. I have with me at the table Andrew Zoll, who's, of course, our budget officer and a familiar face to you all, and Ms. Malia Wilson, who's the CFO.
You had to say that, didn't you, Justice Bethel?
I did.
That he's a familiar face. Just rub it in.
Right.
Thank you.
Doing all we can, Mr. Chairman. But also in the room, I have Cynthia Clanton, who is the Executive Director of Judicial Council, AOC. Taylor Jones, who's the Executive Director of the Council of Accountability Court Judges. Lynn Moore Nelson from ICJE is with us. And then Chuck Boring, who, Mr. Chairman, with your leave, I will call forward at the end, even though Judicial Council falls under, or JQC falls under the Judicial Council's budget. Traditionally, we have asked them to make budget requests because of their regulatory nature in their own right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on page 3, I believe, of your tracking sheet, the Judicial Council requests start in section 6. I will omit any mention other than just the sort of structural nature of 14.1, 2, and 3. 14.4 is where our requests proper begin. This is the request that was consistent with the amended budget and consistent with what we presented before. The Council of Accountability Court judges was seeking restoration of funds related to the peer review process. We thought at the time that it was something that we would be able to get through the federal process. It was not eligible, and so that's a request there that you'll see that $74,000. Turning to your page 4, in the Institute for Continuing Judicial Education, which shows up at 16.1 at the bottom of that page. This is a request for an additional position. They currently are staffed at 7 individuals. This is a coordinating role that generally the people who are now presenting or preparing and presenting the existing training sort of all ad hoc do the process of registering people and keeping track of records. They would like a person to do that so that they can be freed up to do their preparation and training materials. They've had roughly a 34% increase in demand for training from the judges that they serve. And so that's the basis of looking for that position. We have more data on that point if we need to talk about it. And then there's the structural points on 16.2 and 16.3 as well. Looking down on your page 5, 17.1, this is a request for a restoration of 73% of the reduction in operational funds that was a part of the pandemic reduction, and that would be consistent with the position of the House and the Senate in the amended budget. Then on 17.2, 3, and 4, these are requests for new positions at the Judicial Council, so I want to spend just a minute talking about them. The research analyst position that you see at 17.2 would serve with the same group that does judicial workload assessment, circuit boundary assessments. Our production time for those those tasks has pushed out to about, I think, 7. I've got it written down. 70 days. We would like for it to be in the 30 to 40 day range, and so that's why we're asking for it. Last year, you guys requested sort of a record number, so it put strain on that operation, and so we'd like to be adequately staffed there. I will note that 17.3 and 17.1 are reversed labeled relative to the dollar figure involved. And I'm not sure where that sort of slipped in, but actually the IT help desk position would be the $96,980, and the customer service role would be the cost of employment of $73,326. I'll talk about them in the order they're listed, but just note that for the dollar amounts. The customer service support position is for licensing renewals, processing of payments, point of contact response, in other words, just literally picking up the phone and answering, primarily related to the Georgia Office of Dispute Resolution, where we have seen a 33% increase in registered neutrals in Georgia. There are currently 2 people doing that, so 33% increase is where the genesis of a third person to help support them, and beyond that office provide support from an administrative standpoint. The IT help desk position is exactly what it sounds like. This is the traditional IT help desk. This is not the structural network management job. This is, people have problems actually using their systems, and they need someone to help them. And so that's the IT help desk position you see there. 17.5 is a different request for additional role. This is a role that exists currently. I think I've mentioned to some of you, and I know to the chair before, the Policy Council position for the Access to Justice Committee is something that has historically been funded from a grant from the State Bar. I think generally that's, for a lot of reasons, that's probably not consistent with the State Bar's role to be funding positions at the Judicial Council. And so this is, like I say, a position that exists to support the Access to Justice Committee. And so we're asking to continue the position, but not have it be funded directly through an appropriation from you. take credit because we're happy. The judicial workload assessments are ongoing. There's a reduction you see on 17.6. That was a one-time expenditure. And I say one time, it does come up on a periodic basis, but it shows up in 1 year. That's a process that's currently being undertaken by the judges across the state in support of the metrics there. 17.7 and 17.8, consistent with what House and Senate positions were in the amended budget. This is just restoration of reduction of funds for Magistrate Court Judges Council and the Probate Court Judges Council. Primarily, those funds are related to literally the expenses of the executives working in those offices. 17.9 and 17.10, I don't know that they travel together, but they're very similar in nature to me. 17.9 is the victims of domestic violence request, and you'll see that those are clearly the two largest requests that we're bringing to you for enhanced funding. The victims of domestic violence obviously is a program where civil services, legal services are provided to victims of domestic violence, both victims and then dependent children of victims in a number of ways. And certainly if you have questions about that, we can talk about it. The Kinship Care Program, this is a program that many of you are familiar with and have been for years. The original request there was $750,000. It's not that we think that there's not need above that, but this is sort of continuing to get our arms around that level of funding, which we think we can do and deliver that service in a meaningful way across the state, and then evaluate what the need is from that standpoint. Those of you who are interested in the Child Support Collaborative Grant, which you see on 17.11, that reduction does not mean it went away. It's eliminated from this part of the budget. It moved to the general budget, just so that you don't think that that's something that we stopped doing or you stopped doing. 17.12 through 17.15 are those same structural adjustments. I will make a note, just because I know details matter in this world, that 17.16, I think probably that structural is a decrease, not an increase. Just, I mean, but that's. I know y'all like to work on that. Mr. Chairman, if there are questions about what I've presented now or later, I'll stay for them, but I do want to recognize Mr. Boring to speak about the request that the JQC is bringing.
If I could, Justice Bethel.
Yes.
One question on 17.5.
Yes, sir.
Do we know what the reason was that the bar apparently used to fund that?
Felt like a good thing to do, Mr. Chairman.
And, pardon?
I think it felt like a good thing to do. In other words, members of the bar, access to justice, people are for justice generally. There is movement across the nation with mandatory bars, which of course Georgia is, to evaluate how resources are spent and whether those are consistent with the rights of members. And so there is an ongoing process of evaluating, and I think the decision was that this is probably on that line, and asking folks to fund it with their mandatory dues is a little bit different than.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's it. Just wanted to know what the story was on why the change with the bar positioning. Okay. Thank you. Members, questions from the committee? I don't see any.
All right.
So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you,
Appreciate
Justice
y'all.
Bethel. Great to see you. Mr. Boring.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome. The floor is yours.
As usual, I'm on an island. So good morning, everybody. I'm Chuck Boring, the director of the Judicial Qualifications Commission. We have one budget request. As you all know, we are likely, if not the smallest, one of the smallest state agencies responsible for not only regulating the judiciary and issues of ethics, but also assisting with training and advice to the judges throughout the state regarding issues of judicial ethics. One of the requests we have today is actually not anything for JQC staff that I work with or the investigative panel. It's specifically for the hearing panel of the JQC. As most of you probably remember, 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, within that 2016, 2017, the Judicial Qualifications Commission was reconstituted, whereas it was one standalone panel at the time. Now it is two. With that, over the time, there have been some, working out of the kinks of this new system. It is a bifurcated system where now we have the investigative panel, which I work with, that investigates and prosecutes issues of judicial ethics. Those come before a different, separate adjudicative panel, the hearing panel. During the first few years of the reconstituted JQC, there was only one case that was actually litigated before the hearing panel, with hearings, trials, that type of thing, and only 2 cases in which formal charges were actually filed where there was not an agreement between the parties. So, for lack of a better term, the hearing panel wasn't having to do a lot of work. And the hearing panel is made up of 3 members, which are volunteer commission members who have day jobs. Judge McBurney is a Fulton County Superior Court judge. He's the presiding judge over the hearing panel. And as you all know, have heard throughout this session, throughout the past couple of years, it's quite a backlog of work that he has as well. As a part of that, they were able to manage that over those first few years. Now, within the past 2 years, things have started to pick up more. And not saying that that's anything regarding the judiciary and more misconduct or anything like that. It's just we've worked out the kinks, we understand the rules, and we're able to actually bring things before the hearing panel to litigate, I believe, as was imagined when the commission was reconstituted. So whereas we didn't have a lot of work then, now we have, I think it's 8 cases where we have formal charges pending before the hearing panel. And we've begun to start litigating those through the process. They're complicated matters, from challenges to the constitution of our agency, jurisdictional issues, and quite frankly, there's not a lot of judicial precedent in Georgia on issues of judicial ethics. Now, with these cases coming through the hearing panel and getting to this Supreme Court, the Supreme Court is giving us a great deal of guidance, very important and understandable guidance on some of these issues. But to get this to the Supreme Court, so we start getting these judicial opinions and precedent, we have to go through the hearing panel and litigate these issues. So with that, we've got the 3 commission members who are citizens, who have day jobs, and they don't have legal support as in staff. Obviously, my staff, we are a party or an adversary to the judge in a hearing like that. So, we can't offer our services to give them legal support for research, drafting orders, that type of thing. So what our ask is, we discussed it with the hearing panel last year and said, it'd be good to at least have a pool of money or some funds that they can pull from to, on a specified, as-needed basis, retain attorney and counsel to help them through these cases that get litigated before them. We discussed, would there be enough work for a full-time staff attorney, and we just don't think that that would be a wise use of state funds, because I don't think the work would be there. And so we would asking to set aside a pool so they could actually, on an as-needed basis, retain counsel to assist them during these hearings as far as drafting orders, doing legal research, and that type of thing. And so, that's our ask in this. The budget request is at 18.1, is for $100,000 for the hearing panel to be able to retain counsel as needed. And so I know that's very boring, no pun intended, but if any of you have any questions, hey, I got some laughs, all right. So.
They are awake.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the panel? Mr. Boring, thank you for your work with the JQC. We've all sort of lived through and managed this transition to hopefully what is a better new model. And I know you've done that with great efficiencies. I know we have talked offline about the numbers of the workload compared to some other surrounding states and the staff that you have, and you're doing it very efficiently. And for that, this committee appreciates your work.
So I appreciate y'all working with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Juvenile court judges, Council of Juvenile Court Judges, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Great, thank you. I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the Budget Director with the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. And if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and introduce some people that we have with us today. They're all on the front row.
Sure, that'd be nice. Thank you.
First, we have Senior Judge, or Juvenile Court Judge, Jim Whitfield. He's from Cobb County.
Judge?
Juvenile Court Judge Lisa Jones. She's from the Southwestern Judicial Circuit.
Morning,
Juvenile
Judge.
Court, thank you. Juvenile Court Judge Warner Kennan. Juvenile Court Judge Joey Loudermilk. They're both from the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit. And our Executive Director, Eric John.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, we'll be looking at page 8 of the document. Our first item is 20.1. This is actually a continuation of funding that was requested in the amended budget and approved by this committee. This is an increase to our contract, our case management contract. It is an increase of $25,000. Mr. Chairman, did you want me to go over the statewide changes, or the 20.2, 3, 4, and 5 are all statewide changes?
If you want to just hit them quickly for
Okay.
anything you want us to draw our attention to, but otherwise, I mean, the committee members have the data and have the
Right.
information on the budget drafts in front of them, so
Right.
any addition you want to make to that is fine.
Okay, great. Well, the first one, the $96,950, that's the $5,000 cost of living adjustment that was given by the governor. The next one is the 40 hours annual leave payout. The next one is the increase to the employees' retirement system that also goes along with the governor's proposals. And then the last, Yes, the last item is an increase to our billing or for billing from DOAS for $12,213.
Okay.
Okay, our next item is under our Grants to Counties program. This is our juvenile court judges' salaries. 21.1, this is a funding request that's to support House Bill 274, which was actually just passed by the House on Friday. This bill will give a $6,000 salary supplement for the juvenile court judges that have accountability courts. That funding is $690,000. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions or direct them towards our judges.
Any questions from the committee? None? Okay. Chairman Tillery, I didn't see you. Have you been here the whole time? How did you slip in? Should have acknowledged you earlier. Our Appropriations Chair. Very good. All right. Looks like you did a great job. I don't see any questions. And to all the judges, thank you for being with us this morning to be available. And we do understand the request with regard to the accountability court acknowledgement, and so thank you for that.
Great, thank
Okay.
you. We appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Prosecuting Attorney's Counsel, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pete Skandalakis. I'm the Executive Director for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. With me is Chris Jones. Chris is our Chief Financial Officer. And sitting next to Chris is Bert Poston. Bert is the District Attorney for the Conasauga Judicial Circuit. And he's been DA there for 10 years. He's also our Budget Chair. Before I begin, I just want to thank Chairman Kennedy and Chairman Tillery for their assistance on the amended budget. Appreciate very much what y'all did and how you helped us out. And I also appreciate how the committee is consistently helping us out, and appreciate that very much. On your program sheet, we start at page 9, and I'll begin the first part, which is the Council of Superior Court Clerks program. That's simply a pass-through that is placed in our budget. It's simply money that is put there for the Superior Court clerks, and it passes through. We have no control over those funds. So Mr. Holloman's here with the clerks, Superior Court Clerks program. If y'all have any questions for Mr. Holloman, I'll be glad to let him come up and answer them. Other than that, we'll just move on to the DA program and allow Mr. Poston to speak.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also thank the Senate. It's been a tough 14 years since 2008 for us and for our budget. And we just appreciate all the help that we've gotten over the years as funds have been available to help us. So it's been tough, but we certainly appreciate your support and help over those years. So I go down these items in order. There's a lot of them, although some of them can be kind of grouped together, so I may talk about some of them in groups. Item number 23.1 is funds to take all assistant DAs, state paid assistant DAs, and place them on our pay scale at the correct placement based on their years of experience and qualifications. This is a piece that we've been talking about every year in terms of how missteps that have occurred when there were funds in the budget to give a step increase during the current year, and changes in policy and just the budget over that 14-year time period have left us with ADAs that are sometimes significantly below where they should be placed on the scale. And the result of that is you may have two ADAs with similar experience levels that are being paid vastly different amounts of money depending on when they got hired, or two with very different experience levels are getting paid the same amount of money, again, just because of randomness of when they happen to get hired and what the budget process was like at that time. So over the years, some budget years funds have been available, and we've received some fundings to partially correct that program or that problem. A full correction had always been kind of out of reach in terms of the budget, the amount of money it would take to completely fix the problem. But because of turnover and retirements and things over the last 2 or 3 years, we're kind of in sight of that. And this fund would fully place every ADA at the correct placement on the pay scale, and just we would not have to come back next year and talk about it anymore. We'd have fixed the problem at that point. So that's item number 23.1. Item number 23.2 is a request for funds to ratchet up the entire pay scale by 5%. And that's to address the fact that the scale is simply too low for us to attract qualified attorneys and retain attorneys, even without the placement issues that we have with some of our people. The starting pay scale for assistant DA at a law school, starting pay is $50,000. That's up from under $45,000 just a few years ago, but it's still not sufficient given the current climate and the current job opportunities that are out there for young attorneys. For the first time that I can remember in the 30 years I've worked in my office, either as an ADA or chief assistant or district attorney, we had a period of time this past year where we had 2 vacancies that we couldn't even get applicants for. And there are other circuits like that that are just, they have vacant positions that they can't even get a resume sent to them because the pay scale is so low. So that would be a 5% adjustment to the scale to help alleviate that problem. Now, I'm going to jump to item 23.7, which is another adjustment to the pay scale. It is the governor's $5,000 cost of living increase, because obviously both of those items similarly adjust the whole pay scale upward. Our request for the 5% increase was made obviously before the governor's proposal for the $5,000 came out, but we are asking to maintain, as the House did, both amounts, because the $5,000 is a cost of living increase. By itself, it only keeps the purchasing power of those ADA salaries on par with the growing inflation problem that we have. So we feel like we ask for both that and the 5% to try to actually get ahead of the inflation curve and hopefully solve the problem we have with ADA vacancies around the state and with turnover. So that's 23.2. 23.3 and 23.11 are essentially the same item. 23.3 was our initial request for funds that regarded a adjustment to some premiums with Department of Administrative Service and Insurance. As more information came in and new updates came in, it turned out that we not only did we not need that upward adjustment, but we actually were going to save some money. So the House zeroed out 23.3, which we're fine with, and then actually created in 23.11 a reduction of $3,000, which we're also fine with, just based on how the numbers changed between our initial budget submission and our current knowledge. So we're fine with both of those changes that the House made. 23.4, along with 23.12, 23.13, and 23.14 all relate to new assistant DAs related to new judgeships that are pending. Bills are out there. In fact, there are 2 additional circuits that there are bills now out there, Tallapoosa and Coweta circuits, that are not listed here. So to my knowledge, that brings up to a total of 8 judgeships that are under consideration. We don't know at this point how many of those will get approved and whether they'll be approved for July 1st or January 1st.
Those are current.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The 23.4 Cobb, Flint, Geechee have already been created. Just this is funding for that, or is this the annualized?
This is to annualize the funding for that
All right.
in the base budget.
Thank you. So those were funded part year last year, and so this is the annualizer to provide full-time funding for that. So I apologize, those already exist. So 23.12, 13, 14, plus there are also Tallapoosa and Coweta Circuit are the outstanding bills for new judgeships. The 72,581 that is listed on those three would be the funding for a January 1st of 23 placement of a new ADA. So just depending on how many of those judgeships ultimately get approved and when the effective date of those approvals are would be what amount would need to go into those spots. So jumping back up to 23.5, over the last 7 years, I believe, we have come each year and received funding for a certain number of juvenile court ADAs in an attempt to get one in each circuit. These would be the last four, and for the circuits that are named, they're Belfast, Forsyth, Chattahoochee, Northern, and Ptala circuits. And that would complete it. There would still be two circuits that have a local private contractual system that they don't want to change, since they're not asking for one. But this would give every judicial circuit that wants a state paid juvenile court ADA that position. There was a change in the amount from our request to what the House approved there. We believe that is a mistake with regard to how benefits were calculated. I think part of the benefits were calculated there using last year's numbers. And so we can certainly provide the numbers, but we believe the amount we requested, the $569,000, is the correct amount using current benefit numbers, and including that $5,000 cost of living increase. Item number 23.6 is $150,000 to fund legal fees for primarily for when a district attorney gets sued. Sometime the Attorney General represents that DA. Sometimes there's conflicts or reasons that can't happen, and we have to hire outside counsel. And that pot of money primarily covers that. It also covers situations where a DA has a conflict and no other DA can take the case, and again, outside counsel has to be hired to prosecute that case. But the bulk of that currently goes to legal fees for when lawsuits are filed against elected DAs. As I mentioned before, 23.7 is the cost of living, the $5,000. 23.8 and 23.9 are also part of the governor's package, the 40 hours of earned leave time, cash out, and also the changes to the retirement system. So I know y'all are familiar with those. 23.10 is $274. We have two assistant DAs that started out as teachers and stayed in the teacher retirement system, and there's been a change to the teacher retirement system, and so that's just a small adjustment for those two employees. And I believe I've already talked about the rest of them, so I think that covers those items. Our priority, obviously, as it always has been, is our ADAs, getting them up to full placement and getting the pay scale up to a competitive level. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those topics.
Thank you, Mr. Poston. Appreciate that. Let me recognize Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your presentation. And just reviewing what a starting associate would make either in Metro Atlanta or even in the rural areas of Georgia, I'm still concerned that salary is way too low in order to attract and retain talent. Do you have any further thoughts on that?
It's certainly never going to be high enough to compete with a big law firm in the metro area. We just kind of have to feel our way. That's what we're asking for, and then see how that develops and see how our turnover and our recruitment goes from there. But certainly it may still be not enough. We just trying to be responsible and asking for something we think is reasonable.
Well, I guess my concern is it's literally less than one half of an associate at a law firm in Metro Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So my question would be have we done a full salary study to look at what other states are paying and where this would fit in the median of equal level jobs?
Not to my knowledge in the last couple of years. There were a couple of judicial compensation studies done 5, 6, 7 years ago. but anything done recently in terms of, you know, what's happened the last 2 or 3 years, I don't believe so. I'm not aware.
And Mr. Chairman, not only do we have a problem at the bottom of the scale, we have a problem in the mid-range. Prosecutor has stayed with us for about 10 years. Well, has stayed for us 10 years. Only makes close to $71,000. That's 10 years, and that still doesn't make what an associate makes starting in private practice. But of course, most of us go into public service because we enjoy it and we understand we're never going to be rich. But it's just you know, one of those things. We would welcome a study, obviously, and I think the public defenders would welcome a study as well to see where we are in the surrounding area.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, that's something we can work on in the off season.
I think that's a good idea and good area of inquiry. Thank you, Senator. Senator Jordan.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on Chairman Albers in terms of, and then what you were just talking about, the scale up. So who determines the scale in terms of the district attorneys? And then with respect to that, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of scaling up as, you know, you get years of service in.
Our scale is determined by the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and it's really, we have a scale. I think there's 4 classes, and there's steps within those classes. But of course, all of that is, and there's always a provision in our scale that says, depending upon funding. So it's determined by the council. It's also based upon experience that you've been in private practice or experience as a prosecutor, but it's determined by the council, and there's a statute which gives the council the authority to determine that scale.
And just one follow-up with respect to that. Has there been a comparison, because obviously the state of Georgia has a lot of lawyers that they employ in various capacities. Is there anywhere where there's like, where you can kind of look across all of the agencies, or, you know, just to kind of determine, are the district attorneys kind of in line with that or not?
I am not aware if there's any type of program out there where you can look at it. I can tell you we would welcome that, because I believe that our attorneys, you're going to see the assistant DAs are probably the lowest paid in that area.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Jordan. Chairman Tillery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for talking about your employees. Well, how many vacancies do you have now in the ADA position?
Right now, we're running about close to 5%, a little bit over 4%, which is pretty high. And how many would?
About 30 positions.
About 30 positions.
30. I could do the math out, but how many total would?
How many total
ADAs? Yeah.
419.
419. So 30 of 419. That's closer to 10. It's closer to 8%, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the 5% is looking at secretaries as well as investigators. And so I'd have to get you the specific number for ADAs.
Yeah, ADAs specifically. That would be
I'll
helpful.
get that for you.
And then, do you know the turnover for the past year that you've had among ADAs?
We can get that over the last year since the 2021
And yeah, if you
elections.
can do,
We have constantly been seeing that, and as much of a turnover, it's been difficulty actually hiring, right? And so you have people leaving.
and because it is based a lot on elections, if you don't mind, if you could do like 2 or 3 years, so we can kind of get a trend on that, I think it'd be helpful.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, you want just the attorneys?
Well, that's what I heard you talking about.
Yeah,
So-
that's, I mean, we could do that. And before I turn over the prosecuting attorneys program to Chris, let me also introduce Herb Cranford. He is the district attorney from the Coweta Judicial Circuit and one of my bosses, so I didn't want to miss that.
Understood. Welcome.
Great. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Certainly. Moving over to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council program. This is starts with line 24.1. Many of these items are similar to the amended budget, just adjusted potentially for the base budget. 24.1 is just the increase for office rent escalation. It's the standard 3% annual for that base rent. Item 24.2, again, was amended. This is $35,000 for IT help desk support for the Tracker case management system. This is the case management system for district attorneys as well as Solicitor General offices statewide. Currently, there are 3,000 active users for this system. And this funds specifically, these are for a help desk support position that will provide technical support for those users. Line 24.3, this is $40,000. This is restoring funds from the FY21 reductions for training for prosecutors as well as investigators. This training is a statutory requirement for the prosecutors as well as their staff. And as I mentioned, the turnover since 2021, that's also an indication that has driven up our continued need for training the prosecutors as well as the investigators. In FY21, just to kind of give you some perspective of kind of what that training looks like, we had 11,900 attendees, and that was over the course of 179 trainings. And just looking at the attorneys specifically, we were able to provide 27,160 CLE hours to those attorneys. Line 24.4, this is $60,000 restoration for the travel funds for Solicitor Generals. This is to travel to the trainings, and as you recall in the amended budget, we reduced that down to the $20,000. This is to restore that back to their base budget of $80,000, which ultimately what that means is it provides them an individual cap of $500 per employee per year, and so that's supporting about 160 employees within those offices. Line 24.5, this is for the payroll specialist position. This is providing needed payroll specific expertise not provided through payroll shared services, but is actually the responsibilities of the agencies. Between the DA program and the PAC program, we're about $7 million a month in payroll. And so this is a critical position for us. Line 24.6, this is an animal abuse resource prosecutor. Our updated request for this, accounting for the COLA and the benefits, was $201,921. The House didn't recommend it, but we still do think this is a key position for our agency. As y'all recall, last year, this was one of the requests that Commissioner Black, the Department of Agriculture, he is well supported, but also felt that this was a position that really did need to be under the Prosecuting Attorney's Council.
And if I may add, one of the reasons we're requesting this is not only this is a resource prosecutor for animal cases, but it also be special victims cases. We now have one resource prosecutor such as that's working basically on a grant out of Flint Judicial Circuit, or is it Talawega? Which one is Jonathan Adams? Talawega Judicial Circuit. She alone has handled 100 cases, well over 50 trainings. In addition, she's also been a speaker at gang conferences and at PAC conferences. And what we know is that animal abuse and special victims, you can tie that in very closely and very clearly with domestic violence cases and gang-related offenses. And we think it's a need for Georgia. Commissioner Black thought it was a need for Georgia, and we would like y'all to consider putting that back in as our request.
Okay, the final few items are part of the governor's ads and the statewides. Line item 24.7, that is the $5,000 cost of living adjustment for full-time benefit of employees within the Prosecuting Attorneys Council program. 24.8, that's the 40 hours of earned leave payout. Line 24.9, that's also the increase of the 401k employer match, which is being proposed from 3 to 9%. This includes both the Prosecuting Attorneys Council employees, but we also pay into the ERS system for Macon Bibb and DeKalb County employees for the solicitor's offices. And the final two, 2410 and 2411, those are just reductions related to Teamworks Billings and the DOAS risk premium insurance programs. We'll be glad to answer any additional questions.
Okay, that was very thorough. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I don't see any. So, Pete, good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you
Good to
for
see
being with
y'all.
us. Great presentation. All right. Council of Superior Court Judges, please. Morning, Judge.
Mr. Chairman, how are you?
I'm well, sir. Good morning. Thanks for being
Good
with
to
us.
see you. Good morning to you.
Nice to see you.
And you know Art Smith, who I know some of you probably know better than others. He is he's the president-elect of our association, so he's here with me. As our executive director, Shannon Weathers, Charles Miller, who handles all of our budget issues, Clint Bearden, one of our judges from Gainesville, the Northeast Circuit, and then Deborah Nesbitt, our external affairs director. As you recall, and I know that y'all have a busy day, so as you recall, our budget is broken up into 3 parts. That appears on page 12 of your materials, section 9, starting with 25.100 being the section. Several of the things, as you know, change over time. We have 3 parts, that being the program staff, the district court administrators, DCA budget, JED budget, and then the judge's budget. So that's why our budget is broken up the way that it is. In the central program budget, we submitted our request in September, had no idea what the governor's proposal might have been, so you will see some offset from some of that. In line 25.1, we had asked for a raise, but we acknowledged that with the vote that you took relative to the amended budget, as did the House, and for which we are very thankful and very appreciative, and I mean that from as earnestly as I know how to say it. We understand that's probably going to be allocated elsewhere. The lines 25.2, 3, and 4 represent the cost of living adjustment in 25.2. 25.3 is the authorization that you allowed in the, I guess, amended budget from the allow employees to withdraw for up to 40 hours of earned annual leave. And then 25.4 is the ERS retirement system piece. So moving to line 26.1, our DCAs, district court administrators, really in many of our circuits provide the sole source of any support for our superior court judges. I was chastised a bit in a previous presentation when I said in some places they go so far as to provide pens and paper, and I did not want to denigrate what they do. They provide all of the support that we need. So all of the paperwork that goes with appointing senior judges, all of the continuing ed issues, all of the communication issues, occasionally the technical support, IT, things like that. They are all of those things to many of our judges throughout the state. Someone much wiser than me said that it's not a good idea to come in here and just ask to restore back to where we were before, because there was no real indication that that was the right number either. So I wanted you to understand that after the 2020 budget, the DCAs took probably the biggest hit operationally from anybody in the Superior Court program. And they were left with almost no operating budget. They managed and they did a wonderful job and were very resourceful, but many of them lost offices. Many of them could not travel and visit with and handle the business of all the judges in their district, because every county is in a circuit, every circuit is in a district. And so for example, in the 10th district where I am, you go from Augusta all the way up to, I guess, Stevens, all the way to Covington and sort of Athens in the middle, and draw a triangle. That's a pretty large space, and that we're by no means the largest. So what we are asking is that we be allowed to, and what the House had recommended is that we get them back to where hopefully they had been prior, but because we had suffered a great number of losses during that time. I guess in that regard, we were somewhat thankful we were not trying cases during that time because of COVID, because I don't know that we would have been able to support the judges who needed to do that. In 26.2, that was a request for a pay raise that we acknowledge you're probably going to allocate elsewhere. And then lines 26, 3, 4, and 5 are the same sort of reflection of the cost of living increase and the impact of that request from the amended budget. So moving to 27.1, that is the judges section of the budget. The 27.1 is actually a reduction. It's just, and I wish I could take credit for it, but it's just a pass-through. It was a change in the employer contribution in the retirement fund. 27.2 is to annualize a judgeship that was already approved in the Ogeechee circuit, so they're already up and running. 27.3 is to annualize the new judgeship that was created in Flint. And then 27.4 is to annualize the additional judgeship in Cobb. All three of those are already up and running. 27.5, 6, and 7 are requests to fund, at least for a half year, new judgeships, one being in the South Georgia Circuit, one being in Blue Ridge, and one being in Mountain. And I think this probably deserves 2 seconds of explanation. Every year we have an analysis performed of Superior Court judges, and they look at number of cases filed, and workload assessment is what it is called, and they rank circuits based upon need. And so every circuit, whether it be a 20-judge circuit or a 2-judge circuit, has a amount of work that is being done in their circuit, and so therefore the analysis generally is, does your workload justify one judge to one judge, or 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.4? And we have, as a policy through Judicial Council, we have a policy that when you hit that 1.2 number, you begin to become eligible to be considered for a new judgeship, and that's not automatic, but it's the beginning point of being considered. So in, I believe it was 2020, in August of 2020, Judicial Council voted, and they ranked 8 circuits in Georgia by overall need. Just by way of example, the South Georgia Circuit had a need number of 1.8, whereas the Atlanta Circuit, the 8th and last circuit to make that list, had a need number of 1.3. So they were, in the South Georgia Circuit, their business was, it would really accommodate 1.8 judges per one judge. And so that's why they were number 1 on the list. Blue Ridge was second at 1.5, Mountain was third at 1.4, and then Coweta was fourth at 1.5, Clayton was fifth at 1.4, et cetera. That is why I am aware that there are bills pending to create a new judgeship in Coweta and Tallapoosa. And my understanding, the Tallapoosa request, I don't think has even been assigned to committee, or got out of the committee, but the Coweta bill did pass the Senate Judiciary. Just understand that we have no set rules as to the number of circuits that we ask to create in any given year. A lot of it depends on budget, a lot of it depends on what happened the year before and the year before. So there have been times we have asked for no new circuits. There have been times we've asked for 1. I think 3 is about as many as we've ever asked for at a time. This is 3. And so maybe, I'm sure somebody knows of an anomaly where we did 4, I just don't recall it. So typically we do somewhere between 1 and 3 so that you, as you being the reference to the budget, don't ever get avalanche by judge requests. All of those 8 deserve it. All of those 8 qualify for it. All of those 8 meet the judicial qualification, the Judicial Council qualifications. It's just we just went for the top 3. That was having no idea where we would be budget-wise or anything else. So while we would welcome any of those 8 receiving funding from the legislature, we asked for the 3, and we would ask that we follow at least that. Don't not give 1 to the 3 if you're going to give a 4th, I guess would be my request, because that allows us to keep our policy in place and everybody operate on the same sheet of music, so to speak. 27.8 represents a request. Prior to the pandemic, we had gotten to a point where we had 15 senior judge days per active judge so that we could accommodate all of these trials that we've had. I know some of you have been familiar with some of the trials that have taken active judges off the bench by reassignment so that a senior judge could go in. For example, the Ahmed Aubrey case that received a significant amount of publicity. The judge from Savannah that went down and heard that case, a senior judge would be able to continue that judge's active docket in Savannah so that they didn't fall behind by virtue of taking those cases. I know Judge Lumsden went to Columbus and handled a recent case there. So this is not a request for 15, this is a request for 10. that we move it back to a level of 10 senior judge days per judge. And that is a reflection, the reason we didn't ask for 15, frankly, is a reflection that now that we have the ARPA funds, we are able to use some of those funds for senior judge days on targeting serious violent felonies or other actions so that we can target serious violent felonies. So the 10-day restoration is what is referenced in 27.8. 27.9, again, that was a pay raise request that we understand you were probably going to allocate elsewhere, not having no idea at the time that of the $5,000 cost of living increase would be a part of the budget. And then 2710 is essentially the pass-through of the employment retirement system requires us to capture that money. 27.11 is where I would ask that you spend some time, and I'm going to do my best to address some questions that both Senator Albers and Senator Jordan mentioned to the last group. Having law clerks, staff attorneys, whichever phrase the judge uses, is vitally important to any individual judge's throughput. You just simply cannot review all the orders, prepare for next week's hearings while you're having this week's hearings. And it's a reality that this body was gracious enough to acknowledge last session when you approved additional clerkships or law clerkships for the judges who wanted them. Now, as of today, we have 137 law clerk positions that are approved. We have 27 open today. Some of those have been filled effective in August, but we have 27 open as of today. A lot of our circuits, particularly more rural circuits, are reporting that they are not competitive with, and so when they are trying to get law graduates to apply for the jobs, they're just not competitive. Now, I want to be honest, we are sort of fishing in different ponds from what the appellate judges or even the big Atlanta firms are looking for. Not that we wouldn't welcome number 1, 2, and 3 in your class, but that's not really a requirement. Our goal with law clerks not only is to get our work done, but to give back to them, because it's almost like when doctors go through residency and internship, that's really that fourth year of how to take that theory that you learned in law school and teach you how to actually practice law. All we're asking is that our salaries be in at least the zip code of starting ADA and PD salaries. Just so that you know, before the $5,000 raise, a law clerk for a Superior Court judge earned $42,000 a year. That's a very difficult sell at the interview meetings when that first number is a 4 and you now have a law degree and passing the bar, working toward passing the bar. The pay rate, what we had asked was to take them to $52,000. That was our original request, the $1,862,530. Because of the pay raise, cost of living increase, we were able to modify that, and this number, this $450,399, gets us to 50, exactly $50,000 starting pay. To sort of respond to Senator Albers, I agree about the whole idea of having a study performed, because I think that you're going to find that there is a fairly big disproportionate swing between lawyers who do different jobs for the state. To be fair, some of them have different skill sets. I'm not trying to say everybody should be paid exactly the same. That's not fair, because what the Supreme Court's looking for, the Court of Appeals looking for, may not be what we're looking for. But you've got to be in the ballpark to try to get somebody who has incurred that kind of debt that most of our law students are now leaving law school with, to say at least, you might, your repayment on your debt may be proportionate to your income. However, just so that you know, we want that first number to be a 5, and if we do that, we think we can attract better candidates. The 27.12 is the pay raise. The 27.13, or I guess cost of living increase. 27.13 is that annual leave issue, and then 27.14 is the retirement plan. I wish we could take credit for 27.15. It is a reduction. It is simply a DOAS pass-through for administered insurance programs. There's a reduction in that premium. And then finally, the 27.16, it tracks what had been in the other two sections relative to TeamWorks. It is just a slight increase, $14,000. It's not slight, but a slight increase relatively, I guess, for those expenses. Now, y'all have asked some other questions relative to staff attorneys and law clerks that I wanted to we did in the prior amended budget meeting, and I wanted to address. 44% of our staff attorneys have been on the job for 1 year or less. 56%, with that 44, you move that to 56% when you ask 2 years or less. You move that to 67% when you ask for 3 years or less. Now, to be frank with you, we're not trying to create staff positions, career positions. Some judges can do that, but that's not what we're trying to do with state dollars. With state dollars, we are trying to make sure that all the judges that need one have one, which you did last year, and now we're trying to make sure that we can fill the jobs with decent candidates. The only thing that in doing it last year, a lot of the law school graduates, when we got the approval that all those positions had been created, they had already accepted jobs. Because it was, May and they're starting in August, so a lot of those people had accepted jobs. So it was just we're off cycle, so to speak. But we think that $50,000, moving them to that starting budget would be vitally important to our ability to be competitive. We would welcome the study that you referenced. We're not trying to create career positions, but we are trying to be able to get people who want to eventually be in our courtrooms throughout the state the ability to afford to do this job for a year or 2 or 3 and then go on to other things, and that's what we would ask that you do. So I would be happy to take any questions that you may have, comments, et cetera.
Thank you, Judge Padgett. Any questions from the committee? All right. I don't see them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Judge Smith. All right. Let's move on down to the Supreme Court. Justice Boggs, Justice Namias, good to see you.
Good afternoon now. Thank you for having us here. I'm joined by Presiding Justice Boggs, who handles our court's budget for us, by our fiscal officer, Regina Jones. And we also have our court executive and clerk, T. Barnes, here. I just wanted to note at the outset that today is the 2-year anniversary of Governor Kemp declaring the first statewide public health emergency. And the same day, Chief Justice Melton declared the first statewide judicial emergency order. And we lived under those continued orders for about 15 months. You all have been very supportive of us through the 2 years we've wrestled with COVID. We're emerging from that now, but as I talked about in the State of the Judiciary, unlike a lot of parts of our society, we're here without masks and social distancing. We're going to be dealing with a lot of these issues in our judicial system for several years to come, and we appreciate your understanding of that issue for the courts and your support. I'll turn it over to Presiding Justice Boggs to talk about our budget.
Thank you, Chief, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Tillery, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present our FY23 budget. I'll go through some of these items fairly quickly. I'm on page 15 of your budget documents, and I'm now referring to section 10, which is, of course, the Supreme Court. Items 28.1 through 28.5 are required and pass-through items. Happy to talk about those, but you've seen those before and are familiar with those. Item 28.6 is the annualized restoration of funds, which was handled, we appreciate how it was handled by the House and the Senate in the amended budget. This is the annualized amount. Then I'll specifically want to speak to 28.7, 28.8, and 28.9, which are requests for enhancements in the nature of positions. The House funded one of the 3 that we're requesting. I want to speak very, very briefly about a couple of those positions. 28.7 is a request for 1 floating staff attorney position. That is a position that is fairly common at the Court of Appeals. A floater is an opportunity not only to float for a justice. Each justice has of course, 2 staff attorneys in chambers, which means we have 18 staff attorneys. But a floater would also allow an individual to come into chambers when one of those staff attorneys is out on maternity leave or sick leave or otherwise. It would also allow an attorney to float in central staff. We only have 5 lawyers in our office, central staff office. So we constantly are having to deal with short staffs in chambers. We also have opportunities when we have new judges and new justices on our court. There are delays in getting staffs on board, and it helps to have someone that can fill in for a particular period of time. So it's very important that that floating staff position is funded, and we would ask for your favorable consideration of that amount, and it's reflected on item in item 28.7. With respect to item 28.8, we've asked for 2 central staff attorney positions, really prioritized into 2 separate spots. First, we're asking for an individual to assist us with pro se or self-represented, mainly inmates or prisoners. That staff attorney would work with the court clerk and court executive to assist with the substantive legal screenings, the interpretation and initial processing of really extensive filings that are submitted by self-represented litigants, to respond to pro se matters not assigned a case number or related to pending matters, and to offer guidance to chambers. To give you some kind of idea about the volume that we're dealing with pro se filings, I would let you know that 40% of all the filings at the Supreme Court of Georgia are filed by pro se indigent defendants. That's 40% of everything we get. In many of those cases, there is on the other side, a represented litigant, but what happens is the pro se litigants file many more pleadings in those cases than the lawyer does. And so what we're seeing is that about 81% of all of the filings in our court, where there is a case involving a pro se litigant, come from the pro se litigant. And of course that, as you might imagine, and I dealt with it as a trial court judge when I was a Superior Court judge, but pro se litigants typically are filing so much material that it's really clogging up the system. Some of it is confusing. Some of the materials they file are wholly immaterial. Some are incessant filings, but all of those filings deserve our attention and deserve our response. And so we have to deal with every bit of that. Those pro se filings are becoming much more voluminous, and we're asking for a central staff position to assist us with those filings. That's item 28.8. Then also 28.8 includes a central staff lawyer for our regulatory matters. As you know, the Supreme Court of Georgia handles a lot of regulatory matters, predominantly in this context involving disciplinary matters coming from the Judicial Qualifications Commission or disciplinary matters coming from the State Bar of Georgia. The clerk's office, as you know, has the additional rule pursuant to JQC rules to act as the clerk for the hearing panel of the Judicial Qualifications Commission. So our clerk also simultaneously works as a hearing panel clerk for Judge McBurney's hearing panel, and that's analogous really to being a trial court clerk. She has to handle recusals, issues that come up for the commission or the hearing panel or investigative panel, has docketing duties and obligations to file those matters appropriately with our court, keeping up with those filings, responding to requests from media and others for copies of publicly available documents. And so just on the JQC side, and then on the of course, State Bar side, we're seeing significant numbers in JQC or state disciplinary matter filings as well. And so it is imperative, I think, that we get all 3 of those positions. I think we've been very judicious in the way that we've used our resources at our court. But putting a chambers or central staff in a precarious position of not being able to really timely respond to the things that our Constitution and our internal practices require us to respond to is in jeopardy when we don't have the resources we need to respond to those individuals. So we would ask for your favorable consideration of all 3 of those positions included in 28.7 and 28.8. Next, 28.9 was a 3% salary adjustment because we've had some turnover, but we also wanted to fund law clerks at the highest pay scale we have at our court that have gone unfunded. We withdrew that request, so we're happy to offer that up in the House, and of course they accepted it, surprisingly. 28.10 was a increase in funds to purchase document management software, and we're seeking that. 28.11 is the annual cost of living adjustment that you're familiar with. 28.12 is the annual buyout of leave that other individuals have spoken to with respect to their agencies. 28.13 is an increase to the ERS contribution rate, which you're familiar with. 28.14 is simply a DOAS adjustment, and 28.15 is a small adjustment for our TeamWorks billing that you've seen also in other agency presentations that they have made. That is my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer questions any of the members might have. We would ask for your favorable consideration of the 3 enhancement requests that we have with respect to positions. We of course have obligations other courts may not have relative to our constitutional obligations to decide cases in a timely fashion. We really need the resources to do that, and we think these 3 positions would assist with that. So with that, happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Justice Boggs. Any questions? I don't see any from the committee. Thanks for the presentation. Justice Namias, thank you for your previous service, and congratulations as you head into something beyond public service as a justice.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Attorney General, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Mr. Banks, good to see you.
Good to see you, Senator. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chairman, good to see you, too. Chairman Tillery. This is Wright Banks, our Chief Deputy. He'll be joining me today, and we appreciate the chance to be able to present before you. And, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, we're on page 16. 226.1 to 226.6 are all statewide changes. You're familiar with those. I'll start with 226.7, which is to provide funds for 12 positions to establish a gang prosecutions unit in our office. It's $1,318,436. As the chairman is aware, and appreciate his support for the gang authority legislation that has passed the House and is now before the Senate. Appreciate Chairman Strickland as well. The state currently has existing resources to investigate gang crimes, but lacks the needed authority and resources to prosecute. In fact, the GBI alone reported 493 gang cases investigated in 2020 and 553 in 2021. And we have a successful model of having concurrent jurisdiction with our district attorneys that we have great respect for. We just want to be a force multiplier in that issue. 226.8. The governor provided funds for 3 positions to expand our human trafficking prosecutions unit. The House increased funds for up to 6 total positions to our human trafficking prosecutions unit, which would make it $634,968. We had asked for 2 prosecutors and a victim advocate. We would then, the 3 additional positions would be for 2 investigators and 1 analyst, which would be hugely helpful. In 2021, Mr. Chairman, our prosecution unit initiated 25 cases, arrested 9 individuals, investigated and prosecuted 51 defendants, and assisted 107 victims, but our team tells us that they have maxed out, and so these additional resources will simply help us do more greater good for the state of Georgia. 226.9 would be to provide funds for 2 cybersecurity positions, an infrastructure manager and an application manager. Obviously, at this particular time, protecting the state's sensitive information has never been more important. An infrastructure manager would help us to manage the implementation of the agency's security plan and provide for security of the department's IT network. The applications manager would ensure that the most up-to-date technology is utilized, along with necessary software updates, patches, and other necessary capabilities in order to maintain the security of the department's software and applications. I would just note there are only 10 IT positions for an agency that has 320 total positions. So that's 1 position dedicated to performing patches and updates for over 700 endpoint devices and 100 servers. So this is of great need to us as well. 226.10, provide funds for 1 assistant solicitor general. And the legislature has been wonderful to give us an SG. We have 2 deputies. This would provide an entry-level or lower-level attorney that can assist with state and national appellate advocacy. And again, it's a workload issue for us there. And then 227.1 to 227.5 is for our Medicaid fraud unit. It's all statewide changes, and we have no additional asks through Medicaid fraud. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Attorney General, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Senator Jordan, you're recognized.
Specifically on page 18, in terms of the Medicaid fraud control unit. just two questions with respect to that. If you look at the grayed out box in terms of performance measures,
Senator, would you, my pagination is different. Can you give me an item number so I can follow you?
so it's right above 227.1.
227, okay, thank you.
Yeah. In terms of that, we're looking at performance measures specifically, and if you look at the number of cases opened by the MFC unit, it looks like y'all are back to kind of pre-pandemic levels in terms of cases opened, investigations concluded, and even the percentage of cases that were resolved. In fact, it looks like it's at a high out of the last 4 years. But specifically, I'm looking at the number, the dollar value of recovery, it being 6.6 million approximately. Can you give us some meat on the bone with respect to why that recovery amount is so much lower than the previous years when the resolution of cases is higher and also investigations concluded is higher as well?
And I could, Wright can weigh in on this too, but it just depends on the types of cases that we get in a particular year that we resolve. Right? You may have.
That's right. I think there are some pandemic factors at play in there. Certainly our case number, our conclusion rate went way down in FY20. Number of cases was down. Our recoveries were up, and in all likelihood, if we go run the numbers for specific cases, we probably find in there we had some, just happened to have larger recoveries, and we've trended in FY21 down with a lot of smaller cases that just generated a lot less recovery. Some of them look really good on the front end, and then as you get into them, you find out, well, I see them all the time where we started out thinking this was going to involve X dollars, but it really involves Y dollars, and it really is sort of what comes through the system. Don't know of a particular issue there that has generated that number.
And then just one follow-up. And then under that, it talks about fund sources. In terms of the MFC unit, y'all have a federal match, right?
That's right.
It indicates here that we are not getting the full federal match because the unit is not operating effectively. Can you speak to that, and specifically, do you know how many federal dollars we are missing out on?
Adam?
And can you tell me how that came about? Like, did the feds come in and say, all right, we're going to do an audit, and this is what we find specifically?
So it's 75% funded with a federal grant, and we have a separate federal budget. And so to your specific question of the dollars, we can get that to you. I don't have that exactly, but it is a 75-25 funding mechanism.
Right, and I understand that, that's there. But with respect to the dollars that we're missing out on because we're not getting the full match, that's question number one. And then question number two is, how is that decided? Is there an audit of some kind? Are there numbers that are just submitted to the feds?
There is a yearly audit. We can get you more information, Senator.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Mr. Attorney General, Mr. Banks, thank you all for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Last but certainly not least, Public Defenders Council. Good morning. Thank you for being with us. Yeah. It's all right. No, we tried.
Hey, good afternoon.
And just for purposes of our committee, we're going to keep going. I apologize. We have a Rules Committee starting at 12:30. And so if you want to give you all the opportunity, if you can be brief, that would be great. But our people that are leaving are not leaving because they're not interested. It's just we've got obligations that are stacking on top. We've run a little bit long. So thank you.
No worries. Good afternoon. And we're going to make it very brief. Thank you all. I just want to thank all the senators, whether they're here or not, for all the support. We have 24.1 to 24 to 15. And I'm not going to go through each one of them. What 24.1 to 15 speaks to is what we need. To just the minimum that we need to continue to fulfill the mission, to make sure that we can do our job. We need to be able to provide effective representation, but because of our attrition that is kind of high, we're asking Our attrition at this point is too high for an outfit that has statutory and constitutional timelines. We're asking for our attorney's salary to be increased as we have in 24.11 to 24.15. Our goal is to reduce the backlog. Our goal is to make sure that we can reduce recidivism. Our goal is to make sure that we can provide effective feedback to the community that we serve by making sure that we don't have the same individuals going and coming back. And to that, we've been able to create programs that will tackle recidivism, and we have created even our own fund to manage that. I'm hoping that by the time we come to you next year, we can tell you, because that's going to be revenue neutral. We're asking that from 24.1 to 24.15, that's what's going to take us to where we need to be so that we can do our jobs effectively. What have we done in-house to make sure that before we come to you, we're good stewards of taxpayers' money? We have repurposed all the funds that we can repurpose. We have reduced salaries so that we can provide more monies to our contractors. We have moved from our previous location to where we are now so we can save money. That was a monumental move. And so we've done everything that we could possibly do. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go step by step, but I can say to you that we have not asked you for anything that we could have provided in-house. We're coming to you because this is what we need. So we've given you some more information should you need it. I know that our time is fast spent. If you have any questions later on, please ask us. I will be more than available to answer your questions. I know somebody asked about a study. I think that was Senator Elbers that asked about the study.
Yes,
we
ma'am.
have just reached out, and I think Natalie, I didn't introduce my folks here. This is Natalie Glacier because I was trying to hurry. She's our Deputy Director of Legal Affairs and the county functions. This is our CFO, Terry Rayford. On Friday, we reached out to Carl Vincent because we want to do a study to determine what the rates should be, what our ratings should be, what the schedule should be, and to engage our prosecutors in that as well. So it was interesting that question was asked. I will work with Mr. Skandalakis to make sure that we can collaborate on that study. At this time, I'm just going to ask that you favorably consider what we have asked for, because that's what is going to take us to where we need to be.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for that presentation. Any questions? Don't see any. All right.
That's it.
No questions. Thank you. Great
Thank you.
job.
Thank
All
you.
right. And with that, we will stand adjourned. Thank you very much.